If you've ever thought to yourself, I'd rather just read about this than actually do it, you're not alone. The Enneagram 5 newsletter exists to help you move from knowing to experiencing. Every Saturday, you'll get insights designed to help fives grow without overwhelm. Sign up for free today at enneagram5.com/newsletter or visit the link in the description. Now on to the show. Cody.
Yes.
What would you say if I told you that I need you?
That's a tree you don't want to bark up.
Okay, so we're talking about relationships and specifically romantic relationships and how we view them as fives, how we deal with them, some of the pitfalls we've seen, some of the ways we've managed that.
Yeah.
But let's get started with our history of relationships.
Oh my God.
I know you've been really looking forward to this conversation, as have I.
I didn't know what we were going to talk about until this moment.
That's the way I like it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Here we go.
So you and I have very different stories.
Yeah. Opposites.
Yeah. Complete opposites. So I thought it might be fun to.
I was very promiscuous, whereas you had one person ever.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry, Mom. Ahead of time, my mom listens to this podcast. Just stop. Please hit pause. Don't even listen to this episode. I already know where this is going.
I'm sorry, wife, for
listening to my story.
No, for me.
Oh.
Because it's the only person I have to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone knows who it is because I've only had one.
Right. Yeah.
So
true.
I'm sorry, Amy.
Yeah.
But this conversation is going to happen.
It's all going to be about her, I guess. None of my past relationships, I don't think anybody that I know of listens to this podcast. I know at least one of them, my high school sweetheart, which I hate that term, but I know she at least knows this podcast exists and is fully supportive of it, oddly enough.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know if she listens to it, though, so I guess we'll know after this episode.
So let's start there. What was your first relationship, Cody?
My first relationship, I was 14 and she was 17.
Oh,
yeah. I started out promiscuous from the very beginning. My mom loved this. It was like you think it was going to go. I mean, I met her at church, I guess. I think I met most females at church during the teenage years. But the thing is, I was attracted to a certain type of personality, and it was usually the type of personality that I could continue to control and manipulate. I was a sneaky little snake as a teenager. And so even at a young age, I was able to maintain this facade of like mysterious, dark, not playing all my cards, right? So even at 14, like, I managed to catch the attention of a 17-year-old, which is just silly. But for a 14-year-old, it was pretty hot and heavy. I remember making out in my parents' hot tub, and my mom knew. She hated it. And then I dated a girl that lived in my neighborhood that I met. I had this.
It's kind of very convenient.
So I used to ride my bike around the neighborhood, and I would see this girl from afar, and like I had a big crush on her. And I guess we did. I was 15, so freshman year of high school, I guess, around that time. And She was in ROTC, and it was a whole thing. We dated for like maybe 2 months. It was not much of a relationship. But what turned out, I didn't know this at the time, but that was actually going to be my MO, was dating somebody 2 to 4 months and then just moving on. Mostly because no one knew what bipolar disorder is at that age. And so every time I would lose my shit and self-destruct, everybody's like, I'm out. And so I would be like, okay, cool. And then 3 days later, I'd be like, why did they leave? And so I like started this weird cycle of codependency and having that rejection complex building over and over again, until I got to the point where when I was like 18, 19, I was so unhealthy because I would like latch onto people, but then also I was fucking insane. So I drove people crazy, and also was just like, but don't leave. It was the worst situation ever for that's my worst nightmare. So I was my own worst nightmare. And so that happened a lot. And the thing, and so from this point on, you were there for all of the relationships, really. So you'll know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, because
their name.
Because we met when we were 21.
Yeah. It's relationships have been weird for me for the most of my life, because I spent a good portion of my life thinking that I needed relationships in my life because of my teenage years, and actually in a weird, like, kind of crossover way with you, where you had this idealistic way of looking at like high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I had that a little bit, maybe seeking out romanticism in my life, but also really wanting to control it. So it wasn't ever real. It wasn't like sweeping somebody off their feet and doing the whole like romantic, what you see in romantic comedies or whatever. That's what I wanted it to be, but I was not that person. I'm usually, in my teenage years, I was the person that was probably who they were running away from in the romantic comedy. And so it's hard for me to live that, to imagine that now. But yeah, so when I was, actually, I have a really funny story to tell, actually, in this chronological order. So when I was 15-ish, I was dating this girl who was particularly unhealthy for me, who is healthy at 15. And I remember I wanted to break up with this girl because I met another girl, right? And and there was a little bit of crossover there, right? So I kind of started talking to this other girl, and was nothing crazy happening. We were just like talking, but it was like phone conversations and whatever. And because texting didn't exist at this point, we're that old. And so there was still phone conversations happening. So actually, that actually is a great lead, kind of lead into this part. I was on a landline. And I was talking to the girl that I was kind of dating, could sense that something was up, right? So she's starting to have this like spiral out of control panic situation. So she's calling me and whatever, while I'm also simultaneously talking to the girl and like giving her a narration of the situation, because I'm trying to figure out how to break up with this girl, but I don't know how, because I'm a child. And she's calling in while I'm talking to this other person, and I'm going back and forth. And there's a moment where I click over, and I'm just like, I'm so fed up with the situation. It's going back and forth. And so I click over and I tell the girl that I'm interested in, I don't know what I'm going to have to do. Like, this is crazy. I'm just going to have to break up with her. And it was the other girl.
So you had one of those TV moments?
I had a TV moment. And I remember very distinctly her being like, nice, Cody. And that's how that ended. Very quickly and abruptly. And I don't believe I ever saw her again. But that's the beauty of landlines and clicking over. That's not something that people have to deal with anymore. But yeah, so that happened. And so the girl that I was interested in and talking to, I ended up dating from like 16 until 19-ish. I was that it doesn't sound very long when I say it out loud, but at the time it felt like a very long time. And
I mean, 3 years is a long time when you're a teenager.
Yeah. And it was off and on to some degree, and there was some like in between things that happened there, and I was, a shithead. So like there was things that I did that was not nice, and dated other people in between, and the kind of just stupid stuff. But there was a whole kind of progression between 16 and 19 where I became kind of a person that was really shitty and was not easy to be around or be with, because I kind of I became the lowest point of my emotional health at that point, trying to figure out who I was going to be, and emotionally separated from everything and everyone around me, and was always looking in and couldn't figure out how I was always the outside looking in, but I was doing it to myself. And so that was really strange for me, because every relationship was always unhealthy because I was the unhealthy one. So no matter how, I drove everybody insane. And my mom now, if you asked her now, she'd be like, God, you just dated so many crazy people. And I was like, no, I made them crazy. And I see that now. I could make anyone crazy. I could make Madison crazy now if I really wanted to.
You are the common denominator.
I was the common denominator, and I was just insane. But I was a cool and collected insane. So it was really hard to peg that on me. I was always the one who was in control, but I was always gaslighting people and making them think they were insane for thinking or feeling the things that they did. It was terrible. So relationships to me was a means of getting what I wanted and not sharing anything with anyone. It was a one-way street, 100%. And so, yeah, that was a bad time, and it was a bad time for everybody involved. And if somehow any of the people involved with me at that time is listening to this, I'm really sorry. I was a terrible human being. But yeah, there was no way of having a real relationship with me at that time. It took me most of my 20s to figure out how to actually like have a relationship. And I honestly, like, we're skipping ahead, but I wake up all the time and be like, should I be in a relationship? Like, I don't know. Like, and I don't in any way believe I deserve the relationship I'm in now, like, in any way.
Dude, I've been married 11 and a half years, and I still do that too, which we'll get into.
And maybe that's healthy, honestly. I don't know. It's a whole thing. Like, I constantly, I value my space and my time so much, and it's really hard for me to be in a relationship, and it's a constant challenge to my ego and to my self-awareness and all of the things. And I didn't ever accept that before. And it took, I was in a relationship in my early 20s, whom you know, for like 4 years. It was my longest relationship at the time. And it was also my probably most unhealthy relationship.
It was terrible.
It was awful.
Terrible.
It was such a dark place for me. But, well, and it made things so much worse because she was a pastor's kid. And honestly, I think I liked her parents more than I liked her.
You guys kept breaking up and then getting back together. And every time I'm just like, God damn it, Cody. Neither of you should be with the other one.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It was terrible. And it was her that finally broke it off for good, you know, because we'd been together so long. It was just kind of a security blanket, which this is such a classic story, and everybody can kind of relate to that. I feel like, to some degree. I'm sure most people have had that kind of situation, but except for you.
Except for me. I have no exes.
Yeah, you have no exes. God, so weird. I really don't know if I learned how to share space with another human being until after I was married and forced to. And then it was just this constant like clusterfuck of a situation where I was like, how did I get here? Like, and honestly, this is kind of getting into a bigger conversation, but I realized I got there the same way I got everywhere else in life at that point. I didn't make any decisions. I just kind of went with it all the time. I never made any definitive decisions. I didn't decide to break up with somebody. I didn't decide to date somebody. I didn't decide to be in a career or do anything. I just kept falling into it over and over again. And that was kind of my base for all relationships, was like, well, they're here now and I'll get what I can out of them.
So it's very utilitarian.
Has anybody been listening to this podcast? I'm 100% utilitarian. I don't grow a beard unless it's cold. So yeah, I'm always utilitarian, and I actually have to fight against that to have more meaning in my life, more than utilitarianism, and this idea of like humanism and what we are here on this earth to do, and that and get past the idea of that we're just a cancer as a human race. And then not fall into nihilism and just be like, I mean, what else is there other than utilitarianism and what you can get out of everything? And I still fight with that to some degree, because what else is there? We're just here to get what we can. and then leave forever.
Do you remember when we started the show and we were just like, by the way, we're basically extreme narcissists.
Yeah, full circle. Or at the very least, I don't know. Nihilism and narcissism is not the same.
No, not at all. But
it does.
They can go together.
They can go
Really
together
well.
really well, and you can fall from one to the other very easily. And I don't know which side I'm actually on the most. I would say that I'm a nihilist who falls into narcissism in my darkest places, because when I read descriptions of narcissism, I don't actually feel. Narcissist actually makes me violently angry and makes me want to beat someone to death. So I don't believe that I'm really a narcissist, but in my certain stages in my life, I absolutely fell into narcissism. But maybe that was just other things at work, right?
How do you know that feeling isn't just how one narcissist feels about another narcissist?
That's true. It could be. It's like how they had like that old trope, which may not even be true, but it's always in movies and TV shows, that like psychopaths can always sense other psychopaths in a group of people, right?
Or it's like
alpha male,
or it's like Highlander. There can only be one, and so you just
oh man, throwback. We're really dating our audience. If you get that reference, good job.
We can talk about. I guess my teenage years were very, very different.
Yeah.
So I'll even go back farther than that, because I technically had like middle school relationships that lasted a few days.
Well, sure. I also technically kissed somebody when I was 9.
And it would be one of those things where I wanted so desperately to have a girlfriend. And so when I would send someone a note and they would reply, yes, I'll be your girlfriend. Because that's how you did in middle school.
Yeah.
For everyone our age and before. Now I think it's like just texting or whatever.
Yeah.
So that would happen. And then I would immediately have this sense of dread of, what have I done? What do they expect of me?
The domino effect.
Like what
have I said into motion?
What does this mean? Am I trapped forever? Like, what is happening? And
oh my God,
and
poor child.
I would freak out.
Yeah.
And within a day or two, be like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And nothing will have had happened. Like this happens in between classes, so there's no actual interaction.
Yeah, that's the difference between me and you. I was always like, I can break this off. It doesn't matter. Nothing is permanent. Until I get married, then I thought it was permanent, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I had this really, and this I think is where the 4-wing comes into play a lot, is I had this really romanticized view of relationships. And part of that comes from me being having a really strong 4-wing. Part of it comes from growing up, hearing the story of my parents and how they were high school sweethearts and they got married when my dad was 17 and my mom was 19. I now know that there's always a story behind that when that kind of thing happens. But when I was a kid growing up, I'm like, oh, they are the pinnacle of what it means to be in a loving relationship. And I want to be like that. That means if I'm going to get married when I'm, 17, I got to start now. I got to start that process right away.
As a 13-year-old, I've got to be looking for it.
I know. There really was a sense of pressure on that of
sure,
this is how it's supposed to be. And when you mixed in the religious part of it, and for me, I can't separate those two things. When I think through and tell my story of relationships, it was very, very much tied to my religious experience. And there was this sense of, there's this kind of normal sense of, or idea of the one in regular society of like a soulmate or something like that.
Yeah.
But when you add in the religious piece of it, it's not just the one, it's not just a soulmate. It's like a God ordained person. Like God picked out someone,
right? Yeah,
for me, and it's my job to prepare myself for this other person.
Yeah,
but I had a few things going against me. One, I grew up really isolated most of my early years, and so the pickings were slim, as they say. 2, because of that, I also was extremely socially awkward. We've talked about that. I didn't go to school until 7th grade. I was homeschooled before that. And so I had zero social skills, but I had, on top of that, I had this expectation of what school should be like, and very, tied to that was the relationship experience. It was like, oh, this is what it means to go to school. And then this is what it means to start having girlfriends or dating or whatever in the school setting. And I had this because all I knew of this world was through TV. And so it was a very romanticized version.
Yeah, I was going to say, because we're in the future, we know you did not get that.
Right. And it was this very romanticized version of,
Yeah.
like this storybook romance. And this is, but the weird thing about it for me is like, yeah, there was an aspect to it because I was a teenager and it was an emotional piece, but it was almost like, this is how normal people operate, or this is like the story for normal people. Like if I want to fit into this world, like this is the path that I have to take.
Yeah.
Like, so there's that aspect of like feeling like I'm outside looking in. Mm-hmm. And so this is how I get into it. But because of that, there was a sense of desperation. And as you know, if there's a sense of desperation, it's a repellent to everyone you are interested in.
Yeah.
And that's how I was. So I could not get a real girlfriend like most of my school experience. And then and part of that was those middle school girlfriends were from when I first went to school. And then that was like 7th grade. And then in 8th grade, I moved, and we talked about this, where I had this really traumatic experience when I moved and my new school, and no one would talk to me. And so I was a social pariah. And so that made it like impossible for me to get a girlfriend. And that's when I started building up those walls and those stories around what that meant and why and how I didn't need anyone. And then we moved again my junior year, and I was sort of working through that. I was the new kid, and I came from a much bigger, like, metropolitan city to a smaller town. And so I kind of had that going for me. Whereas when I moved to that city, it was at the opposite. I was like small town kid coming in. And,
sure.
This like redneck kid coming into metro Atlanta, like the suburbs. And it was not a good fit. I came into this new school, and there were definitely girls that I was interested in. And they kind of seemed like they could be interested in me, but it never really sort of like, went anywhere. And I didn't know how to navigate it. And so at some point, this was like at the end of my junior year, and I was 16, and I heard God tell me that I wasn't supposed to date.
That's convenient.
The worst thing about being in relationships are I can be a know-it-all at times, and I have to really rein in my knowledge or thinking that I know things and just let other people learn for themselves. And a thing that is really frustrating for my husband is that I am a thinker, not a doer. So I will think about eating healthy or exercising or the things that I quote should be doing, but then doing them is not so easy. He's an Enneagram 1. So for him, he's like, let's just do the thing. And it's just not that easy for me. The best things about being in a relationship are that my friends call me their personal Google. So they don't have to do the research on something they're not interested in. They can just ask me. I'll do a little bit of research, give them a summary, or I'll read the book and give them the summary. And they're like, good, thanks. Now I know the thing I needed to know. And I'm also a good listener and a good probing question asker. And so when my friends are wanting to learn something or wanting to grow, I am able to ask them good questions and listen. And those are the things that I love about being a 5 in relationship with my hubby and my friends.
This is where it starts to get real fucking weird, because I inadvertently learned the secret to getting girls, and that is to make myself unavailable.
Yep. Yep, that is true.
So I made this decision. I'm like, I'm not dating anyone until I get the signal from God or whatever.
Then you got a lot of signals
that this is the one.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I made that, and it wasn't 2 weeks. It was like all of a sudden, all these girls that had no interest in me, started like going out of their way to talk to me, and it was the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
And I did not know how to handle it because I never ever had that kind of attention.
Okay.
And so all of a sudden I've made this decision. I've committed to God. And I went into this whole purity culture thing and was saving myself for the one that got picked out for me.
Which is a whole other conversation.
Yeah,
we could go down
right.
about purity culture and the toxicity of that.
Yeah, that was a clusterfuck.
Sure.
Or whatever the opposite of that is.
It's a fucking cluster.
A fustercluck.
A fuster.
Shit.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know how to deal with all of a sudden, really attractive girls being interested in me and blatantly being interested in me. So it started with, okay, well, this feels good. I like having someone who seems like they actually like me that I could be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to hang out with them and we can be friends. We can make this work. And so I would be friends with these girls and then it would start to escalate to where like, okay, no, they really like me and they're expecting some sort of response. But I felt like I had made this commitment. And if I did anything, it would like fuck up my future relationship.
Sure.
And
yeah. Oh my God. The idea of like it was like ingrained in us, right? Like this, like it was, the seed was planted that we were like, every decision that we made was somehow affecting our future wife.
Yes.
And did you?
I wrote a journal.
Side note. Yeah. Like, right. You were thinking about them and what they might be doing on the other side.
Yeah. I wrote a journal to my future wife with several entries about how I'm struggling and she must be struggling, but I'm saving myself.
And you were thinking about like one day she would read these things.
Oh, yes.
Oh my God. I was there with
Oh, yeah.
that.
I let her read them. It was bad. It was so bad.
Fulfilled the prophecy.
No, I let her read them more as a like, look at this shit I wrote.
No, I know. I mean, I have those probably somewhere. Yeah. I don't even.
Oh yeah. Actually, I think it might be on that shelf over there. I can show it to you.
Oh man.
I kept it because I thought it was funny.
Yeah, sure.
And also like it's funny because it's so sad, right? So
it's also a good reminder of what we could believe in.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just so
especially when we're in that state as teenagers and growing up. So anyway, it started innocently enough because what would happen would be I would, start hanging out with them and yeah, it was clear that they liked me. And then I would feel so guilty because I felt like, I'm going against God's will. And so then it would get to this point where I'm like, okay, I got to end this. And I would be like, sorry, I can't be around you anymore. And that would drive them crazy.
Yeah.
And then it became a game to me.
Yep.
And I realized that there was a certain sort of power that I had. And so going into college, I would try to up the game of like, I wonder if I could get her to like me. And so then I started figuring out how to do that and got to the point where I'm like, I could probably get any girl. I got this huge ego complex, right?
It's amazing you didn't have sex with anybody.
Oh, I know. It was terrible. It was, it was like, it's so many things about it was terrible, but,
yeah.
I would always get to that point because I was so ingrained in that culture. And because my world was so small growing up that I couldn't see outside of it, there was, it had gotten me, it had captured me at that point. And, and so I did end up getting out of it, but it didn't come to college, like later in college.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I kind of met my arch nemesis in that regard.
Okay, explain.
So this went on and on and on, all the way up until the summer before my senior year, which is also the summer that I met my now wife. But this kind of happened before that. Met this girl who was going to my school. So this was when I was going to that, super religious, tiny school that no longer exists because they went bankrupt.
Right.
And when you're in that world, if anyone's been in that world, you know what I'm talking about here. There are these certain couples that are like the church couples, right? They're the epitome, like on the outside, they're the epitome of like, they're the holy couples.
Yeah.
And, they're put up on a pedestal of like, this is what it means to, be in a God ordained relationship. And there were a few of those in the school. And one of them broke up. And the girl from that relationship ended up living in the apartment right next to a friend of mine. And so I actually didn't know her because I pretty much kept to myself for the most part. I didn't know anything really about her, other than I'd seen her in this relationship, and the guy looked like a complete tool, and and that was basically it, right?
Yeah.
And
you filled in the rest of the blank.
Right. And and for context, I was in this phase of my life where this was the darkest period of my life. And so I had started that deconstruction process, and it was like, when I moved down to this new school, I had, taken this game to the extreme. And part of the game that was playing was like, I always kept most of myself to myself. I would let different people see different parts of me, but I never let anybody all the way in. And when I went to this new school, it was the first time in my life that I'd ever been somewhere that no one knew me. Mm-hmm. And so I could really like completely go all in on that and be whoever I wanted to be. And I became that, like, rebel, edgy kid who, which is so funny to think about now. But who was like breaking the rules, and, like, sticking it to the man,
hair in the face.
Yeah, I had really long hair.
Dashboard confession.
Yeah, I played guitar. That was also a key component to the whole getting girls to like me.
Sure, it's also how you get like either invited to and or crash parties.
Sure,
bring a guitar. Yeah.
So
I know that game.
So we started hanging out, and it was clear she liked me, but I was doing my typical thing, and we started hanging out like alone in her apartment. Mm-hmm. And we had this day where it was like a scene from, it really was a scene from a movie.
Yeah.
One of those montage scenes, where I don't even, for the life of me, I can't remember how this whole thing came together. I was auditioning for Chattanooga Idol.
What?
Which was a competition, a singing competition, and the winner got to like skip all of the initial auditions for American Idol and like go straight to Hollywood. And
is that real?
That was real. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was put on by like some local news organization or something.
Was I a part of this? That's awesome.
I don't know. I literally cannot remember how I got into this.
Okay.
And it was just a timing thing where I'm like, I'm going to go do this today. And I think I was telling my friend who lived next to her, and she was there, and he had to go do something. And I was like, oh, hey, do you want to come? And she was like, yeah. So we go, and I go through the sign up, but there's like this waiting period before anybody can do anything. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, well, we got like 2 hours to kill. Let's go like dick around. And so we went and got some food. We went to like Goodwill and tried on a bunch of costumes, and played all these games.
How did you actually end up fulfilling your prophecy of living in a high school TV drama?
It literally was. And then
you guys like flirted from a distance, like trying on jackets in a tie, and like she wraps it around your neck. You like pop out of the,
and we played the game where like she picks out a bunch of stuff for me to try on.
Oh yeah,
stuff for her to try on, and of course it's like
ridiculous things. You pop out of the like dressing room.
That is exactly how it went down.
God, yeah, that's so good. That's so good.
And then of course I go through the competition and I crush it, and I ended up. I mean, there were like 200 or 300 people there.
Yeah.
I ended up placing fourth, but I was the number one guy. The top three were girls, and as I was going off the stage, I remember one of the judges was like, "Man, like it's so funny." He's like, "Man, you crushed it." And I was trying to get you in the top three because you definitely deserved it, but they wanted this girl for that. And like, I was like, okay, whatever. Yeah. But she got to sit there and like watch me perform.
Right.
And like make it through all these rounds, and she's like right there with me. And so it was this weird bonding.
Sure.
Moment.
Yeah. Getting to see you like vulnerable.
Yeah. But also
putting yourself out
but
there.
Also in my prime.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And like
getting to really show off.
You're right. Really show off, and having all of, I'm sure there were like, other girls saying stuff and everything. And so
in your mind, like, come on.
Whatever. All right.
All right. Moving on. Some of this is starting to play out in your own TV drama in your head.
So anyway,
Okay.
we go back to her place. And I introduce her to the OC.
And that's where she left.
No, she loved it.
Uh-huh.
And we were sitting there for like a couple of hours. And here's where I say she was my arch nemesis, because before,
Oh, she's your arch.
she's my arch
I didn't
nemesis.
know we were building up to this.
Yes.
Okay. Well, hey, before we get into this, like,
Yeah.
can we just go ahead and address the fact that, like, as much as I absolutely hate this show, the OC, if you know the show, like, I hate it, but I also secretly kind of love it because of the place it holds in my heart, and the fact that we are friends because of the show. Kind of like we lived together this time. We were kind of friends, but we were almost like, at this point, we were kind of proximity friends, right? Like, we were kind of forced into friendship because of the situation, the circumstances. And you were like, you have to watch the show. And I was like, I don't want to. And you're like, no, we're watching it. And so you just turn it on, and I'm just like, well, I'm here, so I guess I'll watch it. And then 5 episodes go by, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm still watching this. And by the second episode, or by the second season, I'm just like, well, shit, I have to know what happens to these characters now. And I know it's not going to end well because it's this kind of show. And then I get to the end of it, I'm like, yeah, that was a terrible show, but I was into it. So anyway, yeah, that's and it's this is the foundation of our friendship, and this is how we are. Fast forward a decade and a half or whatever. Anyway, so you showed her the OC.
Yeah. So we're watching it, and for like a couple of hours. And so what I was saying is, as my arch nemesis, is prior to her, the way the game was played it was all about subtext.
Yeah.
And like little hints and things. And when there's that kind of ambiguity, there's a lot of ways to manipulate it. There was no ambiguity with her.
Okay.
And so she came straight out and was like, I can't believe we've been hanging out all this time and you haven't tried to make out with me yet. And I'm like, like, I didn't know what to say to that. I was so caught off guard.
Yeah.
Fuck. What am I gonna do?
Yeah.
And we were, and so some more time went by, and then somehow we ended up, somehow we ended up laying down in her bed, just hanging out.
I think she was the one in charge at this point. She was the one in control of the situation.
She definitely was.
Yeah, she changed the power dynamic.
Yeah.
I'll say, like, now, just judging from your calculation of what makes an arch nemesis, I had one too, and I married her, and then divorced her.
Oh, thankfully this didn't go that far.
Yeah, no, because it probably would have happened the same way. Honestly, yeah, no, she was very much the same way. So I get that, like that, like calling you out and knowing like how to like get to the bottom of that situation, and then figure out how to flip, switch the whole control dynamic.
Yep.
Yeah, get that. I totally get it.
So she was there, and she made a couple more comments, and the next thing I knew, we were making out. And
nice.
It was, I was, let me see, I was 21, and this was my first kiss.
Oh my God. So this was devastating to your,
how fucked up was that?
Well, and this is also devastating to your like whole purity idea, right?
Exactly. I went home from that and threw up because I felt so guilty. Like I was physically ill because I felt so guilty about that. And that was when I was basically like a big F you finger and was like, fuck this. And I just like leaned into it. And
that's terrible though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's terrible.
How differently could it have gone in your life had you been like, wow, this actually happened? Like, and somebody kind of pushed me into it, a place that I never would have gone normally. And this person, they weren't your arch nemesis. They were like guiding the way.
I haven't finished the story yet, Cody.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I have not finished the story yet.
Do you end up having a big battle at the end?
No, kind of. So we end up, hanging out, making out several times after that.
Oh, okay.
And
she wasn't a bad kiss. We know that much.
Well, I had no context. I mean,
that's true. She could have been sucking your face like in have you ever seen the Coneheads? Like trying to suck your face off.
I think it was fine. For me, it was just like, whoa, this is the most amazing experience because I've never kissed anyone before. Like
Sure.
I can actually like say, hey, you want to come over and then just make out with someone? Like, what?
Oh my God. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I did not have that experience. I made out with a lot of people, unfortunately. And I definitely remember the worst ones.
So, and a lot of it too was like, I hope I'm doing this right. And
You were their bad makeout person.
well, I wasn't, and I wasn't. So,
Okay. Ego comes into play.
a little bit, yeah. No, yeah, we'll get to that. So,
All right.
and I apologize because I can't tell this story without getting slightly graphic. So,
Put your children to bed.
but yes, please. Okay, so the thing is, though, we were both in this like really religious setting, and so she had kind of these
Oh, that makes it so much more exciting.
weird religious
Oh yeah.
hanging up things
Makes
too.
it so much hotter. Yeah.
But she would say weird shit to me like, "Don't ask me to go down on you. That's too personal." Like, I wasn't even thinking about this, dude. Like this, I just started making out. Like, look,
They did not know where you were.
way down the road.
This is why you should actually maybe explain where you are in life. Be like, hey, by the way, you're my first kiss.
Well, I didn't on purpose
Yeah.
because I was playing this role.
Right. Yeah.
And the thing about me was, at this point, like when I say it was my darkest point in my life, what I had done was like, I'm just going all in on being this is the story at least that I was telling myself. I'm going all in on being this asshole who just like takes advantage of girls. Like,
And the crazy twist of this whole thing is like, I don't know where this story's going, but the whole twist of this is that she actually has these omissions of insecurity and vulnerability.
well, hold on. So,
Yeah.
so she says stuff like that.
Sure.
And eventually it gets a little weird.
Yeah.
And I get, I also kind of get like feeling dirty, from it.
Yeah.
And I'm just in this really, really weird place. And so I basically, I kind of ghost her for, a week or something. And in this time, I had this, I don't know what you call it, epiphany or something like this whole situation is really fucked up and I got to do something to get out of it. And this was when
Sure. Yeah. So much sin.
this,
Right.
but this was when this is what prompted me to go see our pastor that I talked about.
Classic. Okay.
But it was the first time that I ever let someone fully in was when I talked to him. Well, mostly fully in. But I told him what was going on because I felt really guilty. And I'm like, I don't know what to do about this. And
I'm sure he handled it real well.
he handled it really well.
No, really?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
You know who we're talking about?
No, but that's not my experience. Go on.
We can edit this out, but we're talking about Dale.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Fucking Dale. Saint and an angel. We could say Dale. And nobody knows who that is. That's a first name.
That's true. We're talking about Dale. So,
This guy Dale,
yeah. So,
who married me. That might be getting too personal. He did marry me way later though. He's played a role throughout my life as well
that's funny.
in really weird ways. Also is probably the only Christian that I know of who I genuinely believe has a pure heart of gold.
Yes, he's awesome.
And truly serves people and loves people wholeheartedly. Like he's amazing.
Yeah.
So Dale, if you're listening to this, I love you.
Yes. And I am really grateful for him because he actually did handle it really well. And he's basically like, I explained the whole story to him. He's like, I don't really get what the problem is.
Also, too, I think it's funny how we're trying to mask his identity and we're saying nothing but good things about him. I'm going to tell him that he's in the episodes and listen to it, actually.
I seriously doubt he even remembers this conversation, but it was basically like I'm not really seeing a problem here. Like, yeah, it sounds like you're just figuring things out and, it's consensual and
Sure,
all
yeah.
this stuff.
Oh, man. Fucking Dale.
Yeah.
I love him so much.
Yeah.
Right.
So, so I'm riding on a high. I'm like, oh, I had this huge breakthrough. Like, this huge weight lifted off my chest of like, oh, this is okay.
Yeah.
And or it might be okay. And this was the first time I really like opened up to someone, and that felt amazing. What if I open up to someone else? And so I I had done something. I don't remember what I did, but I did something to piss this girl off before I ghosted her.
Yeah.
It could be any number of things, but basically I texted her and I was like, hey, can we meet? I need to talk to you and tell you what's been going on.
Oh, okay.
So we meet in the gazebo on campus at like 10 o'clock at night when no one's there.
It's also very TV like.
Yeah.
Was there like was there a mist going along?
Probably, yes.
Just like in the 1 a.m.
Oh, so
fog machines going full blast.
So she walks up and I tell her my whole story and tell her she was the first person I kissed. And like tell her, you know, like there was some heavy petting involved. And then I'll tell her like this is the first time any of this stuff's happened to me.
Sure.
And was very, very vulnerable with her.
Yeah. I've never had a boner with another person.
And that's, you know, kind of how the conversation ended. She was like, okay, thanks for telling me. And, you know, we parted ways. And then
you parted ways?
Well, for the night.
Oh, okay.
It was late. And so then the next
she was not like, I'm your first kiss, come home with me.
Well, the next day, we met up again to hang out, ended up making out, of course. And then all of a sudden she goes down on me.
Oh.
And it was such a weird experience because it was like, I was so out of body that I couldn't even feel anything. And yet it lasted 30 seconds. Like literally.
You're getting way more personal than I did.
I know. I'm just like,
I love this. Oh man. Okay.
I'm just going to go edit it all out before.
You are not. I'm the one who edits.
The best part is getting to know someone, learning all their mannerisms and what makes them tick, all the little behaviors that make them them. The worst probably is kind of similar, just becoming over analytical of the person and just overthinking everything.
This is why I say she's my arch nemesis, because this happens, right? And afterwards, we kind of have a postmortem. And I'm like, so you said you were never going to do this.
Uh-huh.
And you just did this with no prompting from me whatsoever.
Yeah.
Why did you do this? And she said, well, I knew you'd never had it before and I wanted to be your first.
Hell yeah. This girl is awesome. This is not your arch nemesis.
No, you don't understand. Like it wasn't in that kind of a way. It was more of like a manipulative.
Sure. Yeah. She's a control.
And so but in that moment,
how many people listening to this right now, you're not like, that's the ultimate fantasy as a 5. Like, come on. But we all want to keep control, but we also want to lose control.
Well, yeah, now, but like I'm telling you, at the time,
you didn't know.
She completely tore apart all of my constructs.
This is
the thing, right? But
yeah,
but this is what I'm saying. At the time, this is
but
what.
Now you're like, that was awesome.
I mean, it still wasn't awesome. It was super lame, but yeah,
that's pretty awesome.
So, but I felt here's what went through my head though. It was like, I, up until this point, was using all of these girls. This was a story that I had. I was using all of these girls, and I had the tables turned on me, and I feel dirty.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it actually had nothing to do with religion. It was just that you lost control.
Yeah. And also, like, I got a taste of my own medicine, so to speak.
Right.
So,
okay.
And she got a taste of my medicine.
Oh, of course.
I couldn't resist that.
Oh man.
So anyway, the story's going way too long. We end up
good though.
Oh man,
it's so good.
But this needed to happen to me to like just break everything down.
Yeah.
It ended up she had some weird ties with her ex.
Of course.
And when we kind of like went through this rocky period where I reacted to that very poorly because I felt really used. Sure. And then she ended up like kind of hooking up with her ex again, but then she told him about me.
Ooh.
And I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like,
There's a song about this on the radio right now. I'll tell you about it later. Anyway.
it wasn't just like, one, it was like the privacy thing that we've talked about, right? Where it was like, why would you tell anyone about this? Like, this is my thing. Like, this is not something that
I thought we shared.
Yeah, you don't have permission to share this. And I was pissed. Like, this is the first time I ever cussed anybody out on the phone. I literally cussed her out on the phone.
Well, and this is a side note too, like just an addendum to this conversation. We go into any situation with another person with the assumption that certain things stay between us, right?
Mm.
And if you marry them or you're in an intimate relationship, like that's actually part of our foundation, is that like there are certain things that there's certain lines you don't cross when it comes to inviting other people into that situation.
And it's most lines.
It's most lines. And just side note, Madison crosses those lines constantly with other people. And every time we have people to our apartment to play like game night or whatever, there's always going to be at least 2 to 3 times where she crosses those lines and I'm like, motherfucker. I'm like, but seriously, so many times that like, there's so many things that I don't want anybody else to know. And that's why I'm so open and honest with you. And there's certain situations where like, I'm ridiculously silly and stupid. But because I know that there's a safe space, and then she goes and tells someone. And then I'm like, oh, God, here we go. All right. And then they laugh about it and we move on, and it's fine. It's actually fine. It's completely fine. Nothing matters. But, and
that's generally true, right?
It's generally true. Nothing matters.
Freak out about.
We freak out about nothing.
Yeah.
Literally nothing.
People invading our space or knowing things about us. And
that's actually a really great summation of your story.
Yeah.
Nothing matters.
You know what? Actually, it's really funny because I haven't told this story in a long time.
I've actually, now that you've said it, I've actually remember hearing this story like 10 years ago. Very different context.
Yes, very different context.
Yeah. It's great that we can laugh about it now.
But because of that, you're the first person that's reacted that way, which is like really funny.
What do you mean?
Like other people are like, oh, I can't believe she did that. And you're like, hell yeah, she did that.
It's like, that's a fantasy. Hell yeah. She took control and she just ran with it. Also, like we're in a different time now. Like women can do what they want. Like take control of the man. You know, I don't give a shit. Also, like
I don't think that was the issue here, but sure.
Oh, I think it was a little bit. Like I don't know. She had insecurities. I'm not going to speak to those. We don't know her. She's not in this conversation. She's not here in the room. But like, you needed that.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I did.
Now it steered you in the wrong direction to some degree, and you're in a different place. And
it did and it didn't. Like it tore apart all of the constructs at that point.
Yeah.
And that left me in a really like just raw and vulnerable spot. And what I built back up was the foundation that needed to be there for me to end up having a relationship with Amy.
Okay.
Because coming out of that, it was like a great reset for me.
Yeah.
And I realized all of the bullshit narrative that I had built up. And I realized that you can argue all day about whether or not I heard from God.
You didn't.
I didn't mean you specifically, but you.
Oh, sorry.
You, yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and argue you did. All right. From my personal perspective.
But
yeah.
but I had, I was still very much had a relationship, quote unquote, with God at this point. And so, but it changed because I realized that all the stuff I'd built out around whatever message I may or may not have received was my own interpretation. And I built all this stuff around it.
Sure.
And all of the constraints were the things that I was putting on it. It wasn't like tied to the original message that I actually got. And that point was when, because all this stuff happened during the summer. At the end of the summer was when like I felt like all this stuff was lifted, and it opened me up to, here's the thing. This was the big change for me. What happened on like the other end of this was, prior to all of this stuff happening, I looked at all, this sounds really terrible, but it's fucking true. And,
okay.
And it is terrible. I objectified all women And it wasn't it wasn't in the typical way. It was in the very ugly Christianese way of like, I looked at all women as a potential like person to marry.
Oh yeah.
And so it was like every person, every female that I came across, it was like, are you marriage potential? No. Are you marriage potential? No. And it was very much this whole thing.
Yeah.
And
you had your list of pros and cons.
They were objects to be married or not married. It was so weird. And I realized this coming on the other side of this, and all that stuff broke down. And I was like, wait, so I can have a relationship with a female and it have nothing to do with any of that?
Yeah.
So it was this really cool time in my life where I was like, I'm just going to go like have friendships and relationships with females, like
go ape shit.
Like I'm going to actually get to know females. Like this did not happen before. Like I was so paranoid and so afraid of stepping outside of this story that I never actually like built relationships with people of the opposite sex because I was afraid of what might happen if I got too close.
Sure. Yeah.
And the religion piece was it was more of like an avenue for my own kind of paranoia of getting too close to anyone.
Yeah.
And it was a good mechanism for that. But now it's like, oh wait, I can just appreciate a person for the person that they are and not want to get anything out of it on the other end. And so I started hanging out with, I kind of like, I wouldn't say courted, but it was like this early stages of hanging out with this girl. But it was amazing because I genuinely like really was just interested in getting to know her as a person. Like I thought she was cool and I want to get to know you. Like, if something comes out on the end of it, cool. If not, awesome. Like I have no objectives here other than to just, be two people who get to know each other and appreciate the other person. And I needed to go through that because when Amy and I, we actually met the summer that all this stuff was going down. And so it was like we met at my lowest point, and she obviously was not interested in me at all. And she was also in her lowest point. And so it was just like a terrible timing. But it was actually great because it was very contrast to when we saw each other a few times that summer, but then we didn't see each other for like 6 months. And we didn't see each other again until like January of the next year. And when we did see each other, there was a noticeable difference in me.
Sure. And
that attracted her to me. And that's how our relationship started. And so I had to go through all of this stuff. But we went way longer on this than I had to.
And it's really fine. It's weird because I don't know how people who are listening to this will perceive this conversation, but for me, it's actually really great because of there actually is like a picture frame of romanticism around this story that you don't intend, and that's the greatest part about it because there's so many parts about your story that's hyper romanticized, and then there's actually a story that is romanticized in a natural and organic way, and I'm able to see it because I've been around since the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I see that. I've enjoyed having both of you in my life in different ways, and you guys have meant a lot to me, both together and separately. And I think that that's really interesting because obviously you've created people together.
That we have, yes.
That you have three children that are very different and interesting, and you guys are very different and interesting together. And I just don't believe you ever saw yourself with the person that you ended up being with when you were thinking about the type of person that you were writing those letters to.
Yeah.
And you didn't see yourself being the person you are now and the way that you would view the relationships that you do. I remember very distinctly living with you in the early days and not ever imagining you with Amy.
Yes. Oh, point.
Or her with you.
Right.
Really.
Point of contention. You told me this. Before she and I got married.
No.
And I made the mistake of telling her.
Shit. Okay.
And so for the first few years, she did not have a good opinion of you, and mainly because she thought that you thought that she wasn't a good fit for me, and so she was upset about that.
And the irony is, I actually thought the other way around.
Going back again, I've thought a lot about recently, especially thinking through how I would talk about this conversation in this episode.
We did not know.
We did not know, and I was putting off this conversation for a while because it's very vulnerable. And I knew that I couldn't have this conversation without really fully opening up. And, there are certain phases where that's a lot easier and certain phases where it's harder.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time in my life where I didn't think that it was possible for me to love someone.
Yeah.
And that's a story that has perpetuated in different times and different degrees throughout my whole relationship, my whole marriage, right? The interesting thing to me is this is a crazy story of how that changed. I literally thought that I didn't have the capability to feel the feelings of love for someone because I felt like I'd never felt them.
Totally.
I didn't think, I was so numb to everything. Like, I couldn't feel that.
You're saying this is like as though it's supposed to be shocking to me, but I get it.
Not necessarily you, but maybe some of the people listening, right?
I would argue that I think more people are going to resonate with you than you think, but sure. Yeah. Okay.
So I felt like I wasn't capable of feeling those feelings. And the craziest thing happened to me. I had a dream.
When was this?
This was when I was in college. This was when I was, so this was fall of 2007. So it was about 6 months before we met.
Okay.
And it was when I was still living in the dorms.
Was it about me?
Yes.
Okay. Go on.
Weirdly, it seems like it was about Amy.
Okay.
So I had a dream where I was with this person on a mountaintop, and it was a blonde female, and we were I don't remember the context. This was so long ago. I don't really remember the context, but there was some sort of interaction, and it was like I started to feel the feeling, and all of a sudden, like this pink light shone all around. And Cody's laughing right now for a reason. And it like just permeated all of me and all of the surrounding and all of us. And I felt this intense, overwhelming feeling of love. Like I had never even thought that was possible that I could describe or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I woke up in that moment and I was still feeling that for like 5 to 10 minutes later. I was still feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
And what that taught me was like, oh, wait, I can actually feel this because it wasn't just a dream. I was feeling it afterwards. So there's something there. I mean, you can argue all day about like what that is. If it's just, if it's just purely like biochemical or if it's, something more. But it was a huge revelation to me because I literally thought I was not capable of feeling anything, any kind of intense feeling like that, other than like maybe rage sometimes. And so that was the first spark. And the reason why Cody's laughing is because the first time I met Amy, who is technically a blonde.
She's technically
a blonde. It was in her, so I was friends with her sister and her sister's boyfriend before I met her. I didn't know that Abby had a sister, Amy,
mm-hmm.
right? And I was invited over to their parents' house for lunch, and I walk in, and it was literally like time stopped. I had this moment, and this has never happened before, and everything slowed down. And she was in the corner of the room, like sitting at this computer cabinet thing at the computer, and Abby went to introduce me to her, and she stood up and she started walking towards me. And she has this hot pink hair and this Wonder Woman t-shirt and like pencil skirt and fishnet stockings and high heels. And with high heels, she's like almost 6 feet. And so this is very like, I was not expecting it because I didn't even know she existed. And all of a sudden she was in my world and time completely stopped. And it was so surreal. And I didn't connect those two moments at the time. I connected them kind of later of like, oh, maybe this was some sort of weird premonition thing or something. I don't know if that even exists, but I realized that I could feel those things. And the funny thing is, like, immediately after that, she didn't know it was not apparent, I guess, that I had any kind of experience in that moment, because the vibe that I gave off was like I was completely like aloof and uninterested and full of myself and
Still playing the game.
yeah, which was probably true at the time, but I was in awe. And then I realized, oh, she wants nothing to do with me. And then I just kind of moved on for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this experience.
Was I there for this?
No, you weren't there yet. I had this experience, and then I moved on, but I still don't really know what to make of all of that. But what I do know is that, and this is, we've told our stories. I want to get into how we view relationships now, because it's very different.
Yes.
But I get in, I had a very romanticized view, as we've talked about. And that's showed up in a lot of ways. I thought that relationships looked like a certain thing, and they do not at all look like a certain thing. And I thought that marriage was a certain thing, and it does not at all look like a certain thing. And I thought sex was a certain thing, and it is not at all like I thought it was going to be. And so it's just, life is so complex, and you can't understand it until you live it. And I was trying to understand it from the outside looking in.
Yeah, you're observing.
I was observing.
Yeah.
And you cannot understand that. But the middle of it, when you live it, is very messy.
Yeah.
And it is at times very painful. And it's fucked up sometimes. And so when we got into the early stages of our marriage, we both came in with a lot of baggage in different ways. And there was a lot of damage done on both sides. And one of the things that I remember her saying to me was, I thought you were this big romantic, because that was the thing that I told her, like, I'm this big romantic. And when we were dating, that was true. The way that I planned like dates and our proposal and all of this stuff. And it was a very, it was a very logical thing for me of, well, this is the thing that you do to woo the person to get them to marry you. And then once they marry you, like, then you're married and you do something else. Like, but there is this expectation, because she's a 4. And so there's expectation that continues on, which is understandable. But I'm like, okay, well, we're done with that phase and we move on to the next phase. So that was part of it. And the other part of it too was like, the thing that I didn't realize until I got into the marriage was, because we were dating. So we started dating in February. We were engaged in October, and then we were married the following April. So it was a very quick turnaround for us as well. And when I realized when we were in the marriage, was like, I have no idea how to be in a relationship, and I'm in a marriage. I've had no practice for this.
Sure.
Like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a disaster in a lot of ways in the beginning. And we didn't know how to communicate about things. We didn't know how to like live a life together. We didn't know how to have a place together. We didn't know how to like it's all the minutia of what it really means to build a life and have the day to day.
Yeah.
That I feel like we just weren't really prepared for. And the other thing is that we also didn't know ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I really value about things like the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and stuff like that, is they gave us frameworks to understand ourselves better and to communicate that to someone else and have them understand it better. And that has helped our marriage in so many ways, because we now understand that, like, Amy needs an emotional connection, right? And that's not a flaw. That's a feature. Right? It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah, flaw and feature. Like, let's go with that alliteration. It's not a flaw, it's a feature.
Right.
I love that.
And
I love that.
And I need some space and some alone time. And I need to be able to just get lost in my thoughts sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's
Not
also
a flaw.
It's also not a flaw. It's a feature.
Yeah.
But prior to having these realizations and understanding ourselves in these frameworks, like for the first 5 or 6 years, it was very much, it was easy to take those things personally, because especially in the beginning, it was like, from her perspective, it was like, oh, you don't want to spend time with me. I'm like, no, this has nothing to do with you.
Right.
This is about me.
Yeah.
And I need this so that I can recharge, so that I can be a better partner to you.
Right.
But I didn't know how to communicate that. And so it just came across as like, leave me the fuck alone. I want to have alone time. And which obviously did not help the situation at all. And so
Not.
just like, so much stuff to learn there. And where we've gotten now is so much healthier and such a better place. And it could have gone the opposite way.
Sure.
There were times where I'm like, I can see our future and it looks terrible, but we made choices and we're intentional about trying to move it in the opposite direction. But still I've told her, I mean, this is fairly recently. It sounds terrible, but I think fives understand this, but it sounds terrible on the outside. It's like, I told her, if we didn't have kids, we'd probably be divorced.
Yeah.
And that's hard to hear. But what I meant by that is the progression of the way that things worked out for us was Amy and I are very different and also very similar. So we're very similar in the most inconvenient ways, and we're very different.
If we're choosing to believe in the Enneagram, right? Like, you're a 5-wing
Right.
4, she's a 4-wing 5.
Right.
Like, obviously similarity, but different.
Right. So we're very
You come from same side of the same, or opposite sides of the same coin.
right. So we're very similar in the most inconvenient ways, and we're very different in the most inconvenient ways.
And I've never related to you more being a 5-wing 6, dating a 6-wing 5.
Right. and so you get that. Like, she, I mean, I'm not airing out dirty laundry. She said, say whatever you want to say, whatever you need to say on
She
this.
did right before this episode.
Right before this happened.
Yeah.
And I also want to caveat this with, she's probably the best person I know.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like, all the issues we have are just it's just a friction. Is not any kind of testament to who she is as a person. Like, she's like the most loving, kind, caring person that I know, and like everything, like, she's a lovely person, and I cannot overstate that enough. Like, she's a lovely person,
Right.
And so I want to caveat that with the one I'm about to say. Like, what I told her was, that we would probably be divorced if we hadn't had kids, and it was the timing of the thing where there was so much friction in our relationship, and what I realized was the only reason we were still together at one point was that was the religious aspect of it. It was the shame from the religious aspect of it. And when that went away, there was nothing holding that together, except the only reason that went away was because we got pregnant, and that sent me on this whole journey. And so then now we have a kid, and then we have 2 more kids, and it's like, so then but the difference now is that before we were together because of the shame of separating. And now we're together because every day I wake up and I choose to be together.
Right.
Right? We both do. We both wake up and we choose to be together. And it's not some external force that's causing this to happen. It's because we wake up and we do it. Now, we might have different reasons, like doing it day to day. Maybe some days it's for the kids. Maybe some days because we just like really want to be together, and that's okay. But the reason why there's so much friction, though, one of the other things that I've said to her, which also sounds really terrible, is like, knowing what I know now, there's a good chance that I would have never chosen to got married. And
Totally get it.
yeah, but that's not to say I shouldn't have gotten married. But if you look at like who we are as people, sometimes it's really hard. Like, it takes a lot of effort. It's not just one of those things where we're so complementary that we just both work in our zones of genius all the time and everything works. It's very much like we have to put effort in places that is not, it can take a lot of energy from us. And so there's this constant like churning. But the result of that is we've both experienced an insane amount of personal growth. And a lot of that has come because of our relationship. If we didn't have the relationship, we wouldn't have experienced that. And if I would have chosen someone who was more compatible, where there wasn't that friction, there wouldn't have been the pain to cause me to grow. And that's the hard part, is like, I can look back and say, yeah, it would have been a lot more convenient for me to marry someone who just sort of takes care of certain things for me, or who acts in this certain way, or who does this certain thing. That sounds great in some degree, but also like I wouldn't be the person that I am now. And I need to be this person because the person I was before sucked. Like I need to be who I am. And the thing that I'm grateful for is that like, as we've grown together. Like we haven't grown apart. And I think that that's really the thing that has saved us in a way, is like, we're both growing instead of just one of us growing. And if that wasn't the case, then it'd probably be a different scenario. But we're both going through this, and we're both leveraging this relationship that we have to help, evolve.
So the best thing about being a 5 in general is just the fact that we have such rich inner worlds. And the best thing about being a 5 in love is that when you let somebody into that world and they just totally get it, we can form such an incredible bond with that person, and it feels like it's just the two of you and your own private universe. Having said that, the worst thing about being a 5 in love is that once we have let somebody in to see our mind sanctuaries and see inside of us, we can start to feel really vulnerable. As 5s in general, we're already a little out of the fray. We feel a bit misunderstood, and we're okay with that. We're pretty determined we're okay with that. But I think once we've invited somebody in and we see any kind of rejection from that person, it just cuts a lot deeper. And I think the time it takes to rebuild that trust can be frustratingly long to anybody that's not Enneagram 5, especially.
The best part about being in a relationship as a 5 is that my partner gets me out of my head. She connects to the world and nature and energy in a way that I just don't. She sees a whole layer of existence that I just really have a hard time tuning into unless I'm connecting with her. And on the flip side, I have a lot of strengths in other areas that she doesn't. So we balance each other out. I'm really good with technical stuff and things like that. So that works out well. On the flip side, I think the hardest part about being in a relationship as a 5 is just that I just forget that I'm a person a lot, and I don't have a lot of needs in a relationship unless I do, and then I get extremely anxious about it. But for the most part, I can just cruise along, and I can forget to nurture the relationship in a way that my partner would like, and so that makes it tough sometimes. But I was able to pull through that and able to be stronger together than I think we would be apart.
I think as 5s, it's really easy for us. We don't claim to be Enneagram 5 or Enneagram experts.
Not at all. Definitely not.
But I would say that I know myself pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you know yourself pretty well, and we know each other pretty well. It's really easy for us as 5s and just as ourselves to view life as either it's one of two paths. It's the path that we chose, that we paved, that we chose as the easy route, or it's the hard route. We look at life as either a life, it's a story of convenience where we manipulate the situation where everything works out in our favor. Or it's the story where through the forging of fire and friction, we become the person we never thought we could be because we didn't deserve to be that person because we actually went through the things that were hard and inconvenient.
Yeah.
And what actually happens is a mixture of a little bit of both.
Yep.
And there's a certain point in our life where we choose to acknowledge both aspects of that and just embrace the uncomfortable and the hard parts of our life. I spent a lot of this story acknowledging that I was in control of a lot of it. And I look back on my life and see that for the majority of my life, I'll be 35 this year. I spent most of my life believing this narrative that if it was meant to be, it'll come easily. And that's actually the opposite. But I will put this caveat in there to say that there's a lot of hard shit that's happened in my life. And I don't necessarily believe, first of all, I don't believe that anything was supposed to be or meant to be. And so I just want to put that framework in there, that I'm saying this from that perspective. I've spent most of my life also believing that like there was some type of narrative, or there was some type of destiny that I was supposed to fulfill or live or whatever. And I genuinely believe that's what most fives believe, even if they're not religious. I think that most fives believe that they're meant for something, or they're supposed to be something, or they're supposed to be important for something. And I'm not necessarily discrediting that, because I believe that some of the greatest people in the world believed that at some point or throughout their entire life, and they actually did become those things. But as fives, I think it's easy for us to discredit ourselves early on, and we live out that narrative without realizing it, and end up choosing the lesser version of ourselves throughout our whole life. And it took me until I was in my 30s and divorced, and all the things that was negative and taboo for the entire thing that I believed my entire life, before I realized, wow, nothing fucking matters. And also, like, that was the most freeing thing that ever happened, to kind of come back around to what I was saying earlier and to kind of what you're saying. Like, I love a good story. I really do. I spent my entire life, for sure, and to this day, very passionately loving like cinematography and storytelling, and a good movie and a good TV show. A good story arc really captures my heart and helps me escape from life, right? But sometimes the best story arcs are the things that are right in front of you that you don't realize happened or are happening around you. And I'm actually living the best story arc that I've ever seen, because I have a really fucking crazy story. And when I sit down and really say it out loud, I said very small portion of it in the religion episode in the season finale of the last season. And it's been since that episode that I've started to really acknowledge and really appreciate my own story, and not hold it in a place and in a light of darkness and negative feelings and hate almost, and start to appreciate the fact that I'm actually on the other side of that. And you actually wake up and choose every day who you're going to live that story with, and who you're going to make that story with. And I've never realized that more than I do now, that love and relationships to me and intimacy to me comes from a place of, everything has always been manipulation to me. Everything's always been what I can get out of a situation or out of a person. But for the first time in my life, I remember it had been a while that I'd been with Madison. And one day I woke up and I realized that it wasn't that I couldn't see my life without her, or whatever romantic thing you want to say. It was that I didn't want to. And that was a huge change. That was the first time in my entire life that I'd met somebody that I was like, it doesn't matter what she does. It doesn't matter what she says. It doesn't matter what she looks like 10 years from now. I didn't want to see my life without that personality in my life sharing that story with me. And my entire life changed. It didn't matter what else I did. It didn't matter what else I chose to do. I thought when I got married the first time and then I divorced, I was like, I'm never doing that again. I'm never going to get married again. There's no way I'm ever going to do that again, because it's a construct, and the only benefit to it is tax breaks, right? Utilitarianism. But then I started thinking about this person that I met literally right after the whole situation, and somehow just fumbled into this situation, this relationship with this person who, for whatever fucking reason, cares about me and chose to love me when I was at my worst and my darkest place, and kind of brought me to this place where I'd never been before. It wasn't like she like rescued me or brought me out of this dark place. Like, she made me realize what it actually means to care about another person for the first time in my whole life. And I don't know, I wake up every day going, I don't know, and I'm not sure I know what that means. But I know that I don't want her to leave today, and I don't want her to leave tomorrow. And so I just keep living my life day by day on that perspective, and from that place of like, I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know what a year from now holds. But if the entire world collapses and comes to an end tomorrow, I'm going to figure out how to survive, but I'm going to figure out how to survive with that person. And as someone who is really utilitarian and also loves the idea of post-apocalyptic worlds, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because before her, I always saw myself surviving in a world alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And that actually brings back around full circle, which is great, because when we started, I asked you, what would you say if I told you that I need you?
Yeah.
And the reason why we're framing the conversation this way is that, I feel like that is at the heart of so many of our issues in relationships as fives, is that as soon as we feel like somebody needs us, we freak out.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to be needed. We don't want to have those expectations placed on us. And really that comes from a fear of, not being able to live up to those things, like not like the world asking more of us than we have to give, and this person asking more of us than we have to give. And it shows up in a lot of ways. Like, there are days when I wake up and I'm like, Amy might be better off with someone else.
Sure.
Amy might be better off with someone who knows how to connect with her emotionally to the degree that she seems like she needs, because I don't feel like that person right now. And sometimes I do feel like that person. And sometimes I'm like, maybe I need someone who, doesn't require that of me. And then at the same time, I'm like, but, I want this person in my life. Like, it's a difference between what you said is this victim mentality of feeling like we're caught up in the circumstances and we don't have a choice, versus waking up every day and choosing whatever those circumstances are. So what you said was, I want this person in my life no matter what. And that also means no matter if they have expectations of me or needs of me. Right. And the truth is, we can't control that. We can't control whether or not someone needs us or has expectations of us. We can do our best to set boundaries, and we can communicate those things. And that's a lot of fucking work, and we don't necessarily like doing it, but that is something that, when we choose to prioritize the relationship, that's what we do. And it's because we realize that, I'm going to be better with this person, and we're going to be better. And I don't know what the future brings, but I'm choosing it. And I'm not just choosing this person, but I'm choosing to be vulnerable, and I'm choosing to know that I may not have what it takes sometimes, or feel like I have what it takes sometimes, but I know that I can choose to be my best. And the great thing about being fives in a relationship is that we learn. If you can say nothing else about us, we learn. And we're eager to learn. Sure. And so if we can figure out some of the mechanics of it, some of the frameworks, some of the way to go about progressing and learning, we can be pretty great partners, because I will say one thing, like, if we are choosing that relationship, that's a big fucking deal for us.
Yeah.
Because it is not convenient. It takes a lot of energy, especially if it's the type of relationship where there are big feelings involved. And where we feel, like somebody needs us, like that's a big deal to us. And so it may not seem like it sometimes, but if we're choosing that, that's a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
And so it means a lot to us when people recognize that even that we're making that decision, that we're making that choice, because it's a big deal to us.
Yeah. It was actually really freeing for me to realize that I'm actually in charge of my own story, and I get to be the narrator to that story, and that part of that story is relationship, and the foundation of that, not even just the part, but the foundation of that is relationship. And I get to choose whether or not I'm going to be a certain person or not, and choose to love somebody or not. And I've loved a lot of people in my life, and I've had a lot of history in my life, and chose to, I say, love somebody. I've had a lot of people love me, and I've absorbed that love as a villain, absorbing that power and that energy. And it is a much more freeing experience to be the other way around and to choose vulnerability, because what to me, intimacy and relationship and love just means vulnerability and letting go of control and letting go of everything that I think makes me who I am and choose to be the opposite. And maybe tomorrow I choose not to be that person. And maybe I fall back into everything that's unhealthy. Or maybe I get to be the person who chooses story over everything else and gets to be the person that I think I don't deserve to be. So that's what I think.
That's what Cody thinks. Hey, it's Josiah, and I wanted to say thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you're the type of person who likes helping others, would you do us a favor and share it with other people like you? If you found value in this conversation, they will too. I also want to give a special thanks to our community members who shared their voice with us in this episode. If anything in this conversation has resonated with you, or if you have any further thoughts or questions, I want to invite you to join our community of other people like you and continue the conversation at Enneagram5.com.